Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to part two in this Vinland Saga read-through with uh, Ordinary Ari and the the amazing, the beautiful, the intelligent, the quick-witted, the just the perfect human being that is Jarkey Bacon.
Yes, there's me. I am indeed perfect, and I'm ready to talk about some good old Vinland Saga. It's all I talk about. The only thing I think in the morning as I get out of bed. It's my one personality trait, and I'm using it well on this great channel of Ordinary Ari because
Mm.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to maybe some Elite Ari videos on Vinland Saga. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I don't know. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. For those who don't know, this is the second channel of Ari. So if you want actual scripted content, go over to his other channel. That one's very good, very well edited.
Oh, thank you.
It's got the Jarkey Bacon seal of approval for sure. I
Yeah.
need to actually
And I
add you.
guess, yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
I need to actually add you in my like sidebar for like my pals
Oh
on
yeah,
YouTube. Yeah, so people
I should
can
do that
click.
as well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody looks at those, but it's from those like small allegiancy tests, and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
just makes you look like a big YouTuber, you know?
Yeah, look at all my I don't know, all my affiliates. That's a
Mm.
good way of putting it.
All right. Well, this video here is going to be covering book 2, which is English book 2, I suppose, which is chapters 17 to 28. And in terms of
Mm.
what that covers, I guess spoilers, but I don't know why you'd be watching this at this point. But spoilers for that kind of stuff and everything also that's coming up in the anime that I've seen. So that's the kind of spoiler warning. But the events that are happening in these chapters are we have the battle at the London Bridge. We have uh, essentially Thorkell following Askeladd's group, and then chasing, or then his group actually traveling through Wales, and then the book ends with the killing of the villagers at the snowy village. So that's what we're going to be
Mm.
covering here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So the anime ends on chapter 54. And
oh
so if you
Jesus,
haven't read past that, don't watch because we'll be spoiling everything up to that because that's what Ari has seen. And I mean, I've seen all of it, but I'm here to guide once again Ari on his treacherous
yes.
endeavor through this manga. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty interested to hear your thoughts. I think last time people seemed pretty happy with how we did it, so hopefully this time we can replicate that similarity. And if anybody has any
Mm,
comments on how we can make it better, put it in the comments. I'll be reading them at least.
absolutely.
So, but yeah, we'll see how it goes.
But okay, well, to start off, so overall thoughts. So my first thing that I want to mention is that I don't remember the details of the anime that much, but from what I remember, it feels like it's a very good adaptation. Like I all the high level stuff, like when I got to it in the manga, I was like, yeah, I remember this pretty well, like in the anime. Like I feel like it did a good job. Um, but do you agree with that
Mm.
at this point? Because
Ah,
we're still
yeah.
what halfway through the anime, I think.
I mean, the best episode of the anime, in my opinion, I think, is covered in this book. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, I think for sure. I also think, by this point, I'm not sure if you can remember, but like in the anime, we've skipped over. Well, not we've skipped, but the anime in this time has added a lot of filler. So
mm,
just to pad things out, because for various reasons, which I mean, as a fan, I enjoy in retrospect. I know it may not make the anime as good to me overall, but I'm like, hey, if this is new Vinland Saga content, I'm not gonna complain really, particularly when
mm-hmm.
everything else is done pretty pretty spot on. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, honestly, I don't even remember. I mean, it's hard. I do like when I get caught up to date, I do want to watch the anime again just to see what like the differences are. But honestly, I don't remember much of the filler anyway. Um, but we'll
And when I
see. But
say filler,
anyway,
it's just like Thorfinn growing up and showing a few more things, and it doesn't really um add anything that you need to know. Later on, they do change the
Mm,
order of events, and then they do add some like final events, which I think that's probably the only part at the very end um of the anime where they really kind of feel like, oh, we need us to fill some time. And to
mm,
me, lots of the filler, the reason why I call it filler is because it does feel unnecessary, but at the same time, it's like it gives a little extra context. And I think they'll do something a little similar in the second season, which, as I said before, hey, more Vinland Saga content. I'm not going to be
mm,
complaining. So, yeah.
from Mappa.
We
But
don't know that yet, but it's almost certainly Mappa. Yeah.
that's exciting.
But it's exactly the same core staff.
Yep, that's great.
So lots of people have been getting worried, being like, because Wit has such a high reputation. I think, people are like, oh no, Mappa, they did Attack on Titan worse, and they've got so many things on, and they get really anxious about it. But
Yeah.
I very much trust this director. I recently found a picture of him and Yukimura going fishing, which is
Oh wow.
amazing. So yeah, I mean, like I'm pretty sure he's the biggest Vinland Saga fan of us all. So
Mm,
I trust him basically. So yeah.
yeah, that's good. That's interesting to hear. I was thinking that when I was reading this, like, what are because I know when it comes to the only other thing I really know, which is Attack on Titan, I know that Isayama is very involved in the series. Like he'll give notes on every single episode, basically. Um, so it's interesting to know that they definitely work together, the director and the author. But
Yeah, I think Yukimura is somewhat hands off. I think he does
yeah,
trust. I mean, this is a bit of speculation, honestly, but
hmm
he's kind of like the type who's just like, wow, I'm getting another anime adaptation, and maybe for
hmm
the second season he's getting more involved because um that maybe is what the director wants. I'm not. But I'm sure
yeah,
Yukimura is not the type to over get involved. Like he will only give what they ask him to give. Basically, that's the type of guy he
yep,
seems to be. So he won't kind of barge in and be like, "Oh, I want you to do it this way." He's just like, "Oh, you're giving me an anime adaptation? Oh yeah, I'll take it." That's
mm.
very kind of you. You work so hard on that. So yeah, I mean, I was going to say something else, and I kind of rambled my way out of my brain. Um,
Well, okay, so I have something to say from what you were saying, which
okay.
is that you mentioned how I don't know if you were saying, I think the anime like jumps around a little bit in some
Mhm.
stuff, but my point about that is that at the beginning of this book's particularly, like the first few chapters, it does jump around quite a bit. Like I think we start off with like somewhere between kid Thorfinn and like the older Thorfinn, and then I think we flash forward a little bit, but then we kind of move around a bit as well, like in that 10-13 year or whatever. And I don't know, I found that a little bit confusing. Like I had to keep track of what year we were currently in. But wasn't too
Yes,
bad.
so
That's something I did
it shows
notice.
you like 10-year-old Thorfinn, and then it goes straight to
Mm,
teenage Thorfinn after that. So
yep.
it's kind of catching up to modern day, and basically what the filler is, it shows you that transition more gradually.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, basically, yeah. So actually, I don't think I was trying to say that. I was saying that with that maybe later on they like move a few events around. The
Yep.
chronology doesn't actually really matter in that later part. It's just
Yep.
I was more saying in these earlier parts that I was trying to say the exact opposite. That the filler just adds more. It's more padding, and it, as you say, it helps you get more gradually into it.
hmm
And I
So it
guess it
kind of
does. Yeah,
solves the problem I'm describing here in the manga a little bit.
yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
for sure.
so overall thoughts. Let me fire through this because we got a lot to cover. So
Mhm.
the first thing another thing I've got to say is that I do agree that the art is a lot better in this book, because I remember last time you were talking about, I was saying like, oh, it's so good already in this book, and you said it gets better, and it definitely gets better. Like there's so many just highly detailed pages in this book, and he really likes to do really high contrast kind of things, like where you got really harsh lighting on a scene, and he draws that really well, and that happens quite a bit throughout the book, and I really like that. That's one thing. I think I found it interesting how much Askeladd gets the focus as well. Because when I think back to the anime, I do I do feel like Thorfinn is the main character. Like if I was to describe, who gets the most attention or whatever in the story, I did feel like it was Thorfinn. But just reading through this entire book, we hardly get anything from Thorfinn. It's like almost entirely Askeladd's perspective. So I thought that was really interesting. And it's interesting. I guess it does, knowing that it is a prologue. It does inform, I guess, why we're kind of focusing on Askeladd quite a bit, because it does influence Thorfinn later, I would imagine. But I just thought it was an interesting choice. We also get the final chapter with Anne and the Snow Village is easily my favorite so far, like out of everything. And I do have a interpretation of it that is probably wrong, that I want to talk about later. But I love that chapter. It feels like there's so much happening. But at the same time, it feels very simple and very like a story I've heard before. But I really like it. So that's my overall thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. So I'd say, the dramatic lighting that Yukimura loves to do is one of the reasons why I love his art, particularly when he does it on characters' faces. And this is something that I guess I just really love, and that is kind of drew me in, and he gets more and more. He does that a lot later on at various points, and he still does it to this day. And I love it every single time, basically. So I'm a big sucker for that. The second thing you said, it focused more on Askeladd. Interestingly, I think this is, that's probably a byproduct of the filler, in the sense that like when you show Thorfinn having to wrestle, I remember basically in the filler, Thorfinn's like having to forage for his own food. He's having to wrestle with dogs at night, and then you kind of see Thorfinn grow up, and Thorfinn is the focus. But yeah, we've kind of already transitioned to. I mean, I guess Thorfinn has quite a few fights, but particularly after that London Bridge stuff, it's all Askeladd basically. What is Askeladd going to choose for his band to do? What is he going to kind of like, he makes this big speech about Ragnarok, and all this kind of stuff, and it's his decision. He's dictating the pace of this book. It seems like he is, as you said, the focus. And that's where the common thought, this is where Askeladd starts becoming, most people's favorite character. So, yeah. And then finally, you said you really enjoyed the Snow Village.
Yes.
Yes. That episode in the anime is Yukimura's favorite. At least he said that in an interview once, a little tidbit. Yeah, no, it's really fantastic. And I think what made it stood out to me when I first read it is I like how it used Christianity to develop some of its themes. And one thing I hadn't realized that was in this book that may have made it more potent, and this is, just for English readers, because this is a two volume kind of deal. The opening chapter starts off with one, with John's mother, the old lady, and she has one particular view within Christianity, and then it ends on Anne and her. Basically, it ends on two innocent villages. It starts on an innocent village being destroyed at the hands of Thorfinn, and then ends on a village being destroyed at the hands of Askeladd and his band. So, despite it not being designed that way, it makes the book feel very whole, I think, actually. So it's quite nice.
I didn't even, that's a great connection. I didn't pick that up. That's
cool. I literally picked it up last night as I was flicking through it, and I've read from these books before, so yeah. I guess one thing about the timeline, the chapter titles are the years themselves. So, it goes England 1008 AD, and then it goes forward 5 years. So, anyway.
Yeah, I do feel like also there was, I'll talk about this later, I guess, as well, but there were a few interesting chapter titles in this little section, more so than the first book.
Ooh.
We'll get to that later.
Interesting, yes.
But that's the overall thoughts. Now, I guess quickly to just talk about, I have 4 pieces of art that really stood out. The first was during the Thorkell Thorfinn fight. There's a brief shot where you see Thorfinn's knife dig into something, Like you're meant to you're meant to think that maybe he actually got a really good blow on Thorkell, and then it's revealed that it was Thorkell's hand. And I just thought that was so cool. Like this little panel where you don't know what has been striked, but you see the blood, and it's just a very small detail that I really liked in terms of art.
Mm.
Then again in that Thorfinn fight, I just thought it really sells the power behind Thorkell's blows really well. Because he's obviously so big and every strike is deadly, and I thought it's just conveyed so well in the manga. Then, jumping all the way to chapter 25, so when Ragnar is talking about Canute's backstory, we get this very cool image, which is like in the flashback of Kid Canute, and he is sitting on this like big chair, and there's a shadow of someone killing like another person, and like Canute just has this like face of like he can't do anything in that situation. He's just staring basically at the camera, and it's a great visual. Like there's so many great visuals in this part. And the last, probably my favorite visual, but I don't know. Essentially, there's a really good visual in the Snow Village, so chapter 28, where Anne is holding up her ring, like her hand, and you see the ring in the foreground, and then in the background you see the Vikings going to her house about to kill her family. I love it.
That translation in the anime was also really, really good. I remember that particularly. Yeah, no, I actually forgot about that. It's really good. I mean, I'm looking through this. I'm like, Yukimuro's, and Yukimuro's art gets better after this. Like, it gets better after, like, all the anime like character designs are based on basically the designs that Yukimura has in the Baltic Sea War, which is like chapter 100 plus, basically. And I mean, his art constantly evolves, and I think basically near the end of the prologue, that's where you can generally say it peaks and it just stays consistent, but in a different style every single time. Even when he's still on pen, on paper, like he has a different thing. Now he's on digital, so there's like another different style, and also it helps with the art. So there's some really beautiful shots there. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Well, now is going to be the bulk of the video. So I have a lot of notes on various different characters throughout the story. And to start off is a character that I didn't talk about at all, basically, in the last video, which is Thorfinn. Which I'm assuming, like, my assumption right now is that he's going to be the main character throughout this entire story, even if he isn't at this point. So I thought I'd make some notes on the brief kind of stuff we get of him in this section. So, what is my first one? My first note is that I thought it was interesting that we get one chapter, which is the opening chapter of this book, chapter 17, where we get a transitionary kind of period between the young Thorfinn and the older Thorfinn we get for the rest of the prologue, pretty much. So it's interesting that he's not as far gone as he is later on. Like, particularly we see him when he's yelling at that woman to run away, and then the woman sees him, the old woman, I don't remember what her name was, but when the woman sees him, like, having killed those 2 or 3 soldiers, and he has this moment of, like introspection, where he's like, what am I doing? Or, like, he just doesn't want to be in this situation, which is something that I don't remember seeing, like, later on, especially in this book. We don't get any of that. So, yeah, I thought it was cool to get a little transitionary one chapter, like, just seeing him developing a little bit. Not developing, but him kind of on his journey to becoming who the kind of person who, I don't know, is just consumed by vengeance in the end, Yeah.
No, I really like this chapter. I don't think she has a name. I just call her John's mother, because she calls Thorfinn John because she has this son. And it's one of these small things where she makes a lot of offhand comments, and she seems like just like a pretty normal person, but there's things that kind of, like, she sees her son Thorfinn, so that's why she's overly optimistic that Thorfinn can stay with her. And the thing is, Thorfinn could stay with her. Thorfinn could, make a new life in England and live out his days happy with a new family. But no, he chooses not to and chooses to destroy this village. And he tells her to
Yep.
run, and I kind of took that perspective of him looking almost in introspection, kind of like almost like, why are you here? And I mean, you can take it in lots of ways, but I took it more so um in that, like, he's shocked that she's there, and then he goes, oh, why didn't you run? Like, I wanted to save you, kind of thing. But yeah, I know your point about introspection is also a very, very nice one as well. And I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I think it's meant to kind of instantly show you after you may feel any sort of um feelings that, oh, okay, Thorfinn is justified in trying to kill Askeladd. He's going for this vengeance. Let's cheer him on. And then you're just like, oh wait, he instantly does something really awful and really terrible.
Mm.
Okay. And then after this, he has a cool chapter. So it's interesting. It's almost just like a temperature check, or like Yukimo just kind of checks us a little bit and being like, hey, there's nuance here. Let's not go full on pro Thorfinn, go for revenge
Yeah.
quite yet, So
Yeah, I love that. It's great. Okay, well, the next Thorfinn point I've got is about chapter 19. So when he returns he's had his Thorkell fight and like goes in the river I don't know what that water is called, but it goes in the water and then eventually arrives back at Askeladd. And he yells out to himself, "What's so fun about war?" Which is not something I was expecting, and I don't remember that at all in the anime. I'm sure it's there, but to me, there's two ways. A lot of my notes here, there's like two ways to interpret things. But for me, him yelling out, "What's so fun about war?" at that point, there's a way to interpret that where it's character development, because like as a kid, he was obviously looking forward to fighting in battle, but now he's looking at what's happened and kind of he's just reflecting on how he hates it, and he's only doing it really to avenge his father, and he doesn't actually enjoy the war, which is, I guess you could see it as character development. He's changed from when he was a kid. He's starting to see why it's bad, but he still does it because he still is kind of chained by his dad. But the second way to interpret it is that it's just a defense mechanism that he has. So he lost to Thorkell, and his way of coping is just by thinking that the whole situation is just stupid. Whereas, like, it's not that the fact that he doesn't actually like war; it's the fact that he lost, and now he's trying to find a reason for why he lost. And it's like, oh, it was a stupid, like, why do people like war anyway? It's all pointless. Which is a very kind of like childish thing. Well, not childish, but it's very like he hasn't learned anything at that point, and it's just still he is still that child that he was like a few chapters ago. So yeah, those are my two interpretations of that kind of line he had.
I think both of them are correct. I guess I'd say it's probably primarily fueled by the second part, where he's just being a mopey teenager. He just lost. He's mad he didn't manage to fight Askeladd again. But yeah, like, yeah, it's a good point. Like, he's so enthusiastic about war, but now he's in it. He's just like, this is a pain. This is miserable. I'm miserable. I just got hacky sacked, thrown around by this giant madman Thorkell,
which was crazy.
And he he is just some big bastard, and he is really put up with it. But also, he's just like you have this. I mean, there's probably more to say about the fight, but yeah, I mean, maybe I'm looking into it too much, but I mean, I'm gonna look into it too much either way. But Battle of London Bridge, it starts off really cool, and I love these types of fights, and I'd like to actually get your maybe your views on it a bit more. But like, it starts off cool. Thorfinn goes into the internal monologue, which kind of makes it like, oh, I need to hit the weak points, because he's got range, I've got speed. Let's see if I can get in under his guard. And then it just turns into that, Avengers Hulk smash moment where he says, puny god, puny god, puny god. And then you're just like, wow, this is actually like, oh, this is not that fun anymore. Yeah, it's not much of a fight, not much of a spectacle. You feel like, wow, that hurts. And then Thorfinn comes out the other side and he kind of says this, and you're just like, oh, he's got a point.
Mm,
Like it's understandable worldview to take, and maybe in this case for future reading, um, continue to look at Thorfinn's attitude to fighting. Um,
mm,
so like, yeah, that's all I can really say. Because thinking about it, like, I'm like, yeah, Thorfinn's. How does this line up with Thorfinn's other times where he's fighting? Is he enjoying it? Is he satisfied with it? Um,
yeah.
why does
I
he
do
do it when he
wonder,
does it and all this stuff?
because he will fight Thorkell again. I wonder what it's going to be like at that point. Um,
Mm,
I wish I remembered these details, but I don't. But it's going to be interesting to see like what he thinks and if they talk about their past fight and how he reflects on it a bit. But anyway,
mhm.
that's yeah. It was a great fight. Like it was just so easy to read, and I love it. And I think also talking about the anime again, but I thought that was I remember that really well in the anime, and I remember also liking it in the anime.
Mm.
But yeah,
It's
good,
probably one of the
great fight.
best, like I guess, Sakuga moments
Yeah, like when
in.
I remember he like jumps on the log or whatever, and I'm like, man,
Yeah,
this looks good.
yeah, definitely, definitely. So that's like, oh, I forget the animator that does that, but that's kind of like the big guns for generally. I think the same guy that animated, the very classic Levi, versus Beast Titan scene and all this stuff. So
Ah, okay.
so yeah, we got their Sakuga guy on it basically. So
Yep, perfect. Love it. Um, okay, so we just talked about Thorkell. Now, so this is my last point about Thorfinn, is me just trying to understand with very little of what we've got what he's about, like his like core theme. So I could be very off about. I'm probably very off about this, but so from what I gathered, sorry, in this book is that he seems to hate people who don't fight for their freedom, because he thinks that freedom is a choice, and then because it's a choice, he thinks that people who aren't free are making a cowardly choice to remain not free. Um, so firstly, this could be very wrong, but that's what I've got, and I've got three pieces of like evidence for this. Um,
mm,
so the first one is all the way back in chapter 2, which is when he's talking to Hordaland, the Gorm
yep,
slave, or Gorm, I think it's his name.
yep.
Um, yeah, and he says essentially, what have I got? I wouldn't know I wouldn't know how a slave thinks. If I were you, I'd kill Gorm and run away, and I'd kill any man who followed me. Enjoy life as a slave; it's your choice. And he seems really offended essentially in that moment. Um, that's very obviously ties into what I was saying. Chapter 3, I talked about this in the last video as well, but Leif is telling Thorfinn that his ancestors ran away to Iceland to escape a cruel king that had come to their land. And then Thorkell gets angry and accuses Leif of lying because. And he.
Thorfinn, right? Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, Thorfinn, yeah, he gets angry at Leif essentially, and he accuses Leif of lying and says, "My ancestors wouldn't turn tail and run away from their problems." Um, so clearly he has a problem with, yeah, at least in my opinion, of people who don't fight for their freedom, because he thinks that, unless in that case he doesn't understand that his ancestors ran for the sake of freedom. But I don't know, it's another piece of evidence towards that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And the final one is in chapter 20, which is the chapter titled Ragnarok. So where like Askeladd and Thorfinn are talking about like the twilight of man and all that. He essentially at the beginning, like when he wakes up from his Vinland dream, he looks at a woman who is about to be raped, and she looks directly back at him. And then Thorfinn looks away with. I mean, it's hard to judge, but I think he looks away with contempt.
Mm.
And I think that he is just repulsed that she isn't fighting for her freedom. Like she's looking to him to kind of defend her, and she's not fighting for her own freedom in a way. Which there is also another way to read that, I guess, which is that it's not that he's not repulsed at the woman, but he's kind of just fed up with his current situation, that he's just surrounded by all this kind of violence and just terrible stuff, and he's like, why am I still here? And that's why he like kind of looks at her and then looks away and is like in contempt or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's my final kind of thing. So all of those together, they kind of lead me to the conclusion that at the moment, he thinks that freedom is a choice, and if you don't fight for the freedom, then you're a coward, and he doesn't like you. So that's my big Thorfinn rant, I guess.
Yeah, I
So
think
yeah.
I think that I knew I didn't know which evidences you were going to use when you said 3. I had a feeling
Mm.
the Horderlander one would come up, because that's the only one I could think of. But your other ones that you've linked in are interesting. I'd actually say probably the biggest piece of evidence, and I hope when we get to this part, I remember this point. For this theory is actually almost yet to come, and it will clarify what Thorfinn's mindset is at this time. But I never linked it back to this point. So this is why I like doing this series, because I would have never thought about this otherwise. Yeah, I mean, I think so. The anime cut out the rape scene basically because it is only 3 panels,
Right.
but this is one of Kyle's big rants in his video where he's like, "Oh, they took out this amazing scene." I also think the general Ragnarok conversation is skimmed down, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah.
I know this is one of the most interesting conversations since the Thor's Askeladd conversation for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I mean, it's one of those, I mean, this happens so often, but you're like, wow, we're having a thematic conversation now, but I don't know how it works yet, and that makes it exciting.
Yeah.
And it's just a general interesting historical point that Askeladd makes. And this is why I kind of wish I would have read it, so I would have been able to think of, at least remember some of the details of the conversation better. But yeah, like, it is very interesting. The 3-page panel, I view it more as personally as like to show Thorfinn's disgust, as you said, and I would elaborate on that, but I want to hear your thoughts on the rest of the Ragnarok, I guess.
Okay.
Beforehand.
Well, that will be. I think we'll say that right to the end of the video because I have a whole essentially chapter focus on that chapter, because I thought that was a very, very good chapter.
I thought your chapter focus was going to be on Anne.
Well, I got a section just on Anne, but the Ragnarok chapter, I think the entire chapter is very interesting.
True, it is.
But anyway, yes. So what were we? We were just talking about Thorfinn. But that's all I've got about Thorfinn. But he was not very present in this, in my opinion.
Yeah, you picked up on a fair bit, I thought, for Thorfinn.
Yep. There's a lot in this Vinland Saga. There's a lot going on,
Yes.
So okay, we're gonna move on to Askeladd, and there's quite a lot for Askeladd. So, the first point I have is about chapter 19, which is the Thorkell Thorfinn fight, like that chapter, or at least I guess those kind of events. My one note is that at that point, it still feels like Askeladd doesn't care about Thorfinn yet. At that point. So like he essentially, when he sees Thorfinn being ragdolled and possibly is going to die at that point, he just leaves him and he's like, oh, well, I guess we've lost it. It doesn't really matter like about Thorfinn. And because I know later on, I mean, this is kind of based on my half-baked anime knowledge, but I remember when, big spoiler warning, but when Askeladd dies, he kind of gives advice to Thorfinn in a way. So he does care about him in the end. But at this point to me, it just doesn't seem like he does yet. So I'm interested to see like whether there is something specific that leads to that, or if it's just a really slowly developing thing that will kind of be revealed over time. But in regard to that, like Thorfinn and Askeladd's or I guess Askeladd caring for Thorfinn, there is another possibility, which is that he's throughout all these like kind of difficult situations that Askeladd is putting Thorfinn through, it could be very similar to the kind of the thing you were saying last video, which is that he could just be testing him, similar to how he tested Thor's by asking if he'd become their leader. So if Askeladd was to, if Thorfinn fails with Thorkell, then I guess he was kind of not useless to Askeladd, but like he wasn't good enough to be worthy of Askeladd's respect in a way. So yeah, that's I thought interesting stuff.
Okay, this is a very weird tangent that I thought of just because you said that. It almost sounds like you're making a theodicy for Askeladd. Do you know what a theodicy is?
A theodicy? No.
So a theodicy is a specific theological argument to answer the problem of evil and suffering. So if you're familiar with this, with at least the problem of evil, it's like an omnibenevolent and an omnipotent God um wouldn't allow this much suffering in this world, kind of thing.
Yep.
It's typically regarded as one of the strongest arguments against God in philosophical circles. Anyway, tangent aside, you're making a theodicy for Askeladd in a way because you're saying, oh, Askeladd likes Thorfinn, but he doesn't show it because he's trying to test Thorfinn, kind of like how God tests
Yeah,
us,
that's interesting.
kind of thing, which may lead into the Ragnarok conversation later. But that's yeah, I mean, this is another thing I'd like to maybe remember to come back to. Maybe I should actually type some of this down
Yeah.
in a document so that we can come back to this. But like talking about later, at the end of book 4, how did Askeladd actually view Thorfinn? Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm not even sure if I entirely agree with Yukimura on his interpretation of Askeladd and stuff like that. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, Askeladd is so much going on with him. Like I can see why he would be a lot of people's favorite character. But we'll see as he goes on. Still have a lot more of him. He doesn't die quite yet. But his next major thing that happens, and the thing I've got a note on, is when essentially his speech. Like he kills the messenger on the horse, and he gives a big speech to everyone. And my quote here is he says, I'll be damned, no use in waiting to fade into the sunset, I suppose. Don't you hear it beyond the sound of Ragnarok's footsteps drawing near? He's essentially motivating his people to kind of capture Canute and seize more power or money or wealth or whatever. But he gives that speech, which is interesting. Now, from that speech at the end of chapter 20, which is a big chapter, I feel like my interpretation from that is that he wants to be remembered, which is like he wants to be. He also, I guess, this is kind of bleeding into that chapter, which we'll talk about later. But he brings up in that chapter a coin that survived from the fall of the Romans, and he gives it to Thorfinn. And I feel like he kind of wants to be like that coin. Like he wants to be someone important in this old world that will eventually be replaced, but still be remembered. And that's kind of that's how I feel that what the purpose of this speech was and what he's trying to achieve in his like seizing of Canute and everything that follows now going forward. So that's my point there.
Being replaced and wanting to be remembered. Put that on my bumpers plate. Oh my word. I like that. It's interesting. I don't have much to add, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this I feel like this will be clarified later, but also I like this interpretation, even if it's got some branches of it feel unique, So, like,
yeah. Okay.
I mean, I once again, I wish I could. Next time I'll definitely have a look into some of the specific wording.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, like you can probably glean a lot from certain things. But yeah, interesting. I never really quite thought that Askeladd wanted to write his name in the annals of history, but I don't think with my current knowledge of Askeladd, I don't think that's an invalid interpretation. So.
Okay, cool. My next point is about him wanting to make Canute his leader, similar to how he wanted Thor's to be his leader. So this kind of leads to like me thinking that he wants some purpose in life. Like he wants some great leader. Like the Artorias, like that he kind of talks about and kind of thinks that, well, he is an ancestor of his. He kind of wants someone like that in the world. And it's either that he's looking for he's looking for an Artorias to serve, like a Thor's or a Canute that he's like made into a better man. Or perhaps he sees himself as an Artorias who's trying to guide the world to something greater. By serving a strong leader who can actually shape the world. So I'm sure this is kind of related to the previous point, about like wanting to be remembered, but I feel like it's kind of distinct that he really wants a leader. Like he doesn't, as far as I can tell, he doesn't want to be the leader. He wants to kind of help a leader who can leave a big impact, like whether it's Thor's or Canute. So yeah, another Askeladd point. What do you got to say about that?
I think you are. I think you are getting there. I think you are getting there. That's what I'll say. I think it'll be clarified more later on. But yeah, I think you yeah.
It is funny because I have seen the entirety of Askeladd's life. I just don't remember the details. So half of this could just be me just remembering exactly what happens. Being, oh yeah, this somehow relates to this, but I don't know. We're getting there. We're making it through the manga, paying more attention this time. So the second last Askeladd point is that when he's having the conversation with the Welsh leaders, he claims that he hates the Danes, but I know that later on in the anime, he definitely likes Bjorn, because when he kills him, and misses, he feels bad about it. So he definitely likes Bjorn at least. So I feel like it's a lie that he hates. I don't know if it's a lie that he hates the Danes, but I feel like that's definitely wrong. Whether it's a lie on an intentional lie or just something he's trying to believe, I don't know. But my assumption is that he hates the Danes because he hated his dad, who was a Dane, I think. I hope that's right. But deep down, he does know that everyone is just a person. Like a Danish person is just like any other person in the world. And because you're a Dane, it doesn't make you a bad person or anything. And I do wonder if this kind of point on like equality is related to what Thor's means about having no enemies. So people are people, and you can hate them, but they can't help who they are, so don't hate them for who they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy, I mean,
so this all stemmed from the what did this stem from? I guess his talk,
the talk with Essa or whatever his name is, I forget. The guy with the bowl cut. The guy with the bowl. So yeah, it's interesting. You took that. I think most people, I'm not gonna say which I think is correct.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most people would take what Askeladd says there completely at face value. It's his like almost first mask off moment, you know. It's almost this big grand reveal that he actually hates the Danes. Yeah. And I guess it may tie back into the Ragnarok speech a little bit. So yeah, let's put a pin in that. But yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting interpretation about the whole like he doesn't actually really care where you come from, you know, he just kind of says it. And I mean, Askeladd, after all, is a very wily guy. If he wants to gain the favor of the Welsh for his, you know, benefit, because he needs to get through their lands, then maybe he would do that, you know, so.
I mean, it does feel like at this point, to me, I think he believes it. Like, I do think he thinks that he hates the Danes, but I just don't think he really does hate them, is what I think. Like, it's because of his father and how much I as far as I remember, as much as he hated his dad, I feel like it is just him not willing to like the Danes just because how much he hated his dad, who was a Dane. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now I have one final point about Askeladd, which is just he is someone I need to revisit later. And I wrote this weird like thing, which is that he loved his mum, he hated his dad, but he looks up to Artorius. He wears Roman armor, but leads a bunch of Vikings. He's proud of his Roman heritage, but then he puts down the Romans when he talks about them being crushed by the Saxons. There's a lot going on with him where I'm like, I just need to revisit this when I have all of like his entire life basically. Yeah. Askeladd,
for sure.
Weird guy, crazy guy, a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. I think what I like about Askeladd a little bit more than most other, you know, I guess characters is that he is very self-aware of his wants, his needs, what he's missing in life. I feel like in general. So even though, you know, he can get, as you kind of say, he gets passionate about the Romans, he's also not blinded by the fact that they got beaten by the Saxons.
Yeah.
he kind of says as a historical fact. He's not ignorant towards that, and that almost makes him way more likable, but more almost powerful as a character. Like his interpretation of events, he feels quite very competent and very trustworthy, and in that sense that you like whatever he's seeing, he's probably making a correct assessment of the situation. He's pretty he's a pretty smart fellow and pretty mature guy as well. So
Yep.
it makes him, I guess, for me, cathartic to read. Sometimes when I'm watching characters and they've got a very clear character flaw and then they do something stupid and it makes me only facepalm, it can sometimes make me frustrated. I know I'm not sure if it's a big meme here, but it's a big meme. I don't like Evangelion that much, or Evangelion, as I sometimes prefer to say. I know that's not.
Hey, say it out.
Go on a tangent. Is this allowed? Tangent
yeah,
time?
go ahead.
All right. So okay, it's called evangelical. It's evangelicism.
Well, yeah,
It's an evangelism. So Evangelion makes sense to me. But then I also heard that it's confirmed by Anna that it's Evangelion. So I'm like, oh, whatever. So I mean, like, it's just one of those weird names where I'm like, whatever. Is it GIF?
Yeah.
GIF? Doesn't matter, people.
Hey, man. I mean, I say Evangelion because like the Japanese pronunciation, basically. But who knows if that's more valid than anything else?
Yeah. Well, they've what is it? Culturally appropriated. Whatever. Yada yada yada.
Very true.
Anyway, interesting Christian imagery. But talking about Christianity. I'm trying to make a segue here.
Don't you worry. Next person up is Thorkell, who has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity at the moment.
Yeah,
as far as I'm
Christian, the most Christian of them all.
Yeah. So my big note is, what is a warrior to Thorkell? And my answer to that is that someone who has a strong will to fight. And that's based completely off. I don't know. He's just. Small things he says, like when he's fighting Thorfinn, and in chapter 21, which is the chapter when it's the one where he's marching and there's Ragnar and Willibald as well. And Thorkell says specifically, how did you fight and how did you die? That's what matters. The stronger the foe, the better. Which I feel like kind of encapsulates Thorkell at this point. If you have a strong will to fight, he will respect you as a warrior. But I think the interesting thing to me is that he's probably as strong in this belief as Thor's was in his belief. Like nothing was able to shake Thor's. I don't think anything will be able to shake Thorkell. But I guess we'll see. But that's my only note about Thorkell at this point.
Interesting. What is your first impressions of Thorkell?
Like when I watched the anime or like in the manga?
Both. I mean, I think you already know what he's about in the anime, I guess, and when you read the manga. So
yeah.
Maybe just the anime. I don't know.
What did I think of Thorkell? I just thought he was a typical Viking. Where I'm like, this is what I imagine in my head a Viking is, like some really strong like warrior who's really overpowered and will kill his enemies, and he really wants a good fight. That's why he's fighting for the English,
Did you think Thorfinn would beat him in the fight?
Yeah, I did think he would. Which was interesting that he didn't to me.
Yeah, because it's weird. I don't know why when I read the manga for the first time. So like this is when I haven't watched any of the anime hasn't caught up at this point.
Yep.
I thought like I had flashbacks to the London Bridge. I don't know to the very first chapter and to that captain. I was like, Thorfinn's just gonna make mincemeat of this dude. I know, like he's just a big oaf. He can throw a big boulder. He holds a log. It's really not that big deal. And then you realize, like Thorkell is this monster. He is that strong. Like he is, like legit, like the most.
He's just an immovable
warrior.
Object. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's an unstoppable force. And like I don't know why, but I just didn't clock onto that at all. And so when I saw Thorfinn lose, I was like, "What? Okay, I thought Thorfinn was going to absolutely destroy this sucker in a fight." But in the anime, they add a few more things. So like, there's this almost famous scene, like the episode like has a cliffhanger. It's introduction to Thor's. Thor's just throws his big axe and it cuts through like 10 guys' heads or whatever, five
Right.
guys' heads in the anime, and that's completely new to the anime. So anyway, I was wondering if you got a similar impression because of the anime or not. So
No, Thorkell strong, but
he's
Thorfinn
strong.
stronger. But no, he wasn't.
For sure. He wasn't. No.
Yeah, Thorkell. That's all I got. I when you were talking about that a bit, just about Thorkell, it did remind me. Like there is one scene I remember from the anime right at the end where he stops. I don't remember who. He stops someone from doing something when I think when the king is killed. Maybe it's Canute or someone. So he there is more to him. Obviously, it's just I don't remember what it was. You know. But anyway.
Yeah,
Thorkell.
I mean, I think Thorkell's. I think Thorkell's one of those guys. I mean, I think a lot of these characters are liked because of their superficial traits. Apart from Askeladd, Askeladd always has this little bit of mystery to him. And people like Thorkell because they find him funny. I'll be honest, I don't find Thorkell humor very funny, but Thorkell, he's another one of those characters that is more self-aware than you'd think. He just kind of, he does have brain cells. He just kind of elects not to use them at sometimes, or he just chooses to be this way, which makes him more interesting to me, because that gives, more room to kind of analyze him, I guess. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. There is depth.
I think his design looks really cool. Like his really long, like defined face, and I don't know, it looks really cool. Like I remember seeing him in the manga. I'm like, man, this looks good.
He's got a big chin. They nerfed it in the anime. They made his chin not so massive.
Unbelievable.
But yeah, unbelievable. Can't believe it.
Yeah, did Kyle rant about that one?
I think so. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Oh my gosh, guys. I know why I gave him an American accent. As everybody knows, American accents are the peak of a whiny, annoying accent. Yeah.
Of course.
Apologies to my American brethren out there. Maybe we should say like the most annoying one is actually probably Canadians. I think we should kick the Canadians down. They get way too much praise. I mean, it's true. Everybody complains about America, but not about Canada. Those guys. Actually, this is another tangent. You can edit this out fully, or we can keep it in.
All right.
So, full disclosure, I'm both an American and Canadian citizen. My parents are from there, so that's why I feel allowed to make fun of these people. But one time in one of my English lessons, we had this poem come up, and it was from a Canadian dude, and then my English teacher, he's like this classic, like he was actually really good at doing English. He's really good at analyzing. I'd be fascinating to be like, oh, what's his thoughts on Vinland Saga kind of thing. Like he could probably have some really in-depth, thoughtful interpretation of anything. He kind of just whips a poem and starts analyzing it and breaking it down completely. Really impressive stuff. But he was also really quite lazy and a bit like, he'd come in with this waistcoat on that's way too tight because he drank way too much Diet Coke. He's got a mini fridge at the back of the classroom and he smokes all the time. He's quite short, but he has a swagger and like a personality the size of the planet. And he just goes on a rant about how like he hates Canada. Like there's nothing there. Like they're basically just America. All they're known for is some stupid condiment that's way too expensive in the supermarket. And anyway, he goes on this big rant, and I felt like I felt offended because you don't talk bad about Canada. That's like the sacred grail. You make fun of America. That's what you do. You don't make fun of Canada. Anyway, it's one of those nice moments where
maybe he is Canadian.
Yeah, maybe he was one of the first things he said was like in the classroom. He was like, "Oh, I've got an IQ of 145."
Oh, Jesus.
That's like one of the first things he said, and you're like, "Oh my word, he's this type of guy, huh?" But guess what? You can argue with it because he was really smart.
Yeah.
But he was just really lazy.
It's weird. It's weird thinking on like English class in school. Because like I hated English class, and here I am writing like analysis essays on like
it is weird, right? I mean like I was slightly dyslexic. I could never really write fast enough. I could never be as good at English as I wanted to, and I was always more interested in English because of the kind of the situation surrounding it, more historical stuff. So when we're doing of Mice and Men, learning about the Great Depression, that was interesting. When analyzing Winston Churchill's speeches, because got to do that in the UK, because he's our golden boy. Understanding like the situation around that, or Animal Farm, and where George Orwell was at the time, and what communism was looking like in the Soviet Union, and oh, that stuff is interesting. But when you're just like, oh, here's a random poem, and it's got a sibilance in this,
Wow,
and that makes it sound more evil or deceitful because it sounds like a snake. Oh man, isn't Shakespeare such a genius? I'm like, wow, absolutely. Yeah, sure, Shakespeare's a genius, sir. Anyway, we've been on a tangent long enough.
Okay. Yes. English good. Canada bad.
English is good. Canada bad. America good. America good. Very good. Particularly after all the news recently, people are feeling very good about America.
Yes. All right. Let's move on. We're gonna talk about Canute. I think that's how it's pronounced.
Canute.
So there is something I want to say, which is that the reveal of Canute's face works infinitely better in the manga.
You're on some Kyle talking point. Oh my!
I mean, this is the first time where I'm like, this is clearly better in the manga, because I remember when I was watching the anime and they revealed his face, I was like, is that it? Like, what are you all like gawking at? Like, he's a bit feminine, like why are we focusing on this for so long? But when it's in the manga, like the way he's drawn and like his eyes that like look so, they're like I don't know, it's just so big and like. It's just so mesmerizing. And like, I understand why they're like so in shock and like looking at this guy and it's like, that's a prince. I don't know. I really like it in the manga. It was a great reveal. And like, when I see Canute, like his like subsequent appearances, I'm like, yeah, I can see why everyone is like so not weirded out, but like so like this is a strange guy.
Yeah, that is true. Like he I mean, I think also in the anime you can kind of slightly see behind his helmet because it is color, like so you almost feel like you see him a little better, while in this he's got like his helmet on and his eyes are always shaded out, and his eyes. I mean, I don't think his eyes are ever drawn exactly like this, but they're glazed over. He has no pupils. I mean, I'm sure you could dig into that. Like, I mean, Askeladd has his interpretation later, right? I'm pretty sure. He looks into the eyes. I'm not sure if it's in this part of the manga. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they've mentioned it a little bit, yeah.
And let me have a little read of this real quick. That is not the face of the king. That is what I saw. I'm not sure if he elaborates on that. It does look fairly girlish. But couldn't he change as you get over it? Well, I suppose. It's just a lie.
Is that the conversation with Bjorn that you're talking about?
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating conversation. I think there's a lot to characterize Bjorn, actually.
So I haven't... well, that's the thing. So I haven't... kind of a tangent a bit, but I haven't got notes on that particular exchange. But when I was reading it, that's the one bit where I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. So I didn't even make notes because I'm like, I need to revisit this later. I've got absolutely no idea.
I mean, I'd probably need to actually revisit like a certain Reddit thread to remember exactly what. But yeah, like Bjorn's reaction here, like, I think it's meant to suppose that if Bjorn understands what Askeladd is thinking more than we do, Bjorn, it kind of hints at their friendship, and why Bjorn is special, why Bjorn is unique. And I mean, you may remember from the beginning, this Bjorn kind of has this almost moment where he says, "Oh, I just fight for the battle and the glory and honor, and that's all I like." And then Askeladd kind of laughs back at him and says, "That's why I like you, Bjorn." But it's almost like Bjorn's eyes in that panel are shaded out, and it's one of those classic tsundere, "Oh, I'm not telling you exactly what I'm thinking" moment. So
yeah. Wait, so what chapter is this for?
This would be the London Bridge, right at the beginning before Thorfinn jumps off to fight Thorkell. So
right.
19, I guess.
Yep.
It's one of those interesting ones where he also has a little humph, like humph kind of like expression.
Wow.
Anyway, but yeah, like his eyes they're vacant. I guess that's what I'd say, like, and as you continue with Canute, he doesn't have a personality, in some ways. And so
Wait,
they sort
who
of
doesn't have a personality? Wait, who are you
Canute,
talking
and
about?
in some way, yeah, his
Okay,
eyes are
okay.
vacant, in this panel. So I think that's
Mm,
maybe one way I'd interpret it, and it's like, um, but it kind of does give this almost like ethereal feeling to Canute, and
mm,
you're like, oh, maybe this guy could be king, and then Askeladd's like, no, definitely not. So I don't know. It's
yeah.
interesting for sure.
Yep.
Um,
Something to look back on again. I should create a list of things to look back on, but um,
there's just too many at this point. Yeah.
yes. So on continuing Canute, um, so I have this note that I think Thorfinn and Canute are obviously going to be paralleled. Like to me, it just seems very obvious. I could be proven so wrong later, but it's just like, man, these two characters are being paralleled hard. And how they're being paralleled is not very obvious to me. Like I don't know why they're being paralleled, but my current guess is that they're going to go on opposite journeys where um, Thorfinn will learn the importance of peace, and then Canute will learn the importance of war. And that's based on like absolutely nothing besides just like what I know in the anime, and like what happens with Canute right at the end of it. So yeah, essentially that. I don't really know what my evidence is that they're actually being paralleled. I feel like there is one. The thing that really made me think it was the opening chapter of this book where like Thorfinn's hair is like being straightened, and he just immediately, I'm like, whoa, that reminds me of Canute. Now I don't think that's intentional,
Ooh.
but to me it felt like I was like, wow, it felt like Canute there. And that really, and as I continued reading, I was like, I want to keep track of this, see if there is any parallels. Yeah, which at this point doesn't feel like there are anything immediately obvious besides the fact that they're the same age.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens going forward.
Yeah, I shall not comment on
Yes,
that
yes.
comment.
Okay. Well, we'll go straight to the next one, which is that, well, my final actually Canute point here, which is that there's a falcon that is associated with Canute. We see a falcon twice, in the story in two different chapters, I think, and both times it's associated with Canute. And my note is that I wonder what this means because I don't know anything about birds. There's probably some symbolism concerning falcons that I just don't know about.
His
But
helmet also has wings on it.
does it? Oh, I guess I didn't even remember that, but that's a great point. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
so what I was thinking with the
Well,
falcon is that maybe it's just him because obviously a falcon is in the sky, and it's just him looking up at all the expectations everyone has of him. Um, it's like, oh, I need to be like that falcon. Now I don't know what that falcon represents, but I need to be like it. Um, so that's what I'm thinking about Canute. Any
hmm.
comment on that one?
I remember one Falcon time. I don't remember the second.
So there was
You know
the
what?
first one was with Ragnar, right? It's like, oh, Ragnar, catch the falcon or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the classic one, right?
the other one was when they get ambushed and Askeladd's like commands Canute to like speak to the people ambushing them, but then he doesn't.
Yeah. So what I'd say to that Falcon part, and I think it will lead to the Ragnarok. But before actually I say that, actually maybe the opening page of chapter 21, or maybe that could be the middle part, the Valhalla. Because there you see Canute's eyes, actually. So I was incorrect. This isn't the first time you see
Oh,
Canute's eyes in the manga.
yeah,
Interesting. Anyway, the only reason why I say that is because the leaves are falling.
yep.
Anyway, and that kind of reminds me of
Falling
your
leaves. Yeah.
Attack on Titan.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes,
But
if
so,
someone's listening and they like Attack on Titan, I make Attack on Titan videos. Like, I don't think I've mentioned that yet, but check out
oh yeah.
Oligari for
Well,
that.
actually, I think we probably should mention that, considering that there's been, we got a bird now, and you've been alluding to
Yeah.
freedom. Thorfinn gets mad at anybody that doesn't fight for freedom. Almost feels
Yes,
like
yes.
Thorfinn is Aaron at this point.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I remember specifically that freedom point. I was like, I need to be very clear, like when I'm writing this, that like what the difference is to Aaron, or if they are the same thing. But I had that in my mind when I was writing that point.
I'd say
Yeah.
weirdly, in recent chapters, it's become more like Attack on Titan in some regards.
Mm,
Um,
interesting.
and dare I say, I mean, you like the ending, right?
Attack on Titan.
Yeah,
I love it. Love it. Good
you
stuff.
love the ending. Okay,
Love it.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm of the opinion I'm the mixed bag camp, which is like, effectively fence sitter for this one. I'm just like, there's stuff I liked and stuff I didn't like.
Yeah.
I'm almost of the opinion that uh Actually, should I won't actually say this. I won't say it. I won't
All
say
right.
it. Just because we're still early on. I'd say this if you're caught up with the manga, and then my
No,
theory
no,
could
no.
be
Yeah,
proven
don't
wrong
say
still,
it.
if that makes sense. But anyway, what I'd also say, so we got the Canute Falcon. I took it to mean that like it's another picture of somewhere not here. Like Canute doesn't
Mm,
want to be here. He's aloof. He's apart from the situation. Um,
yeah.
and it's that sign of freedom. And he's like, oh, I think also the fact that he's like, oh, Ragnar, can we eat that? It's almost like,
Mm,
oh, I've almost like it shows that his privileged life because that he gets to eat falcon. Which who
yeah.
normal person eats falcon? It's like someone eating pheasant.
Mm,
It's like no normal people eat chickens or pigeons, maybe. Um, yeah. So, but it's interesting you caught on that. I never really considered the falcon before, but now you mentioned it. He's
mm,
got the winged helmet, which I can't remember exactly what historical meaning that has, but it's
yep.
something.
And we talked about it last video, but he looks like Griffith from Berserk. Now I don't know if that's
Oh, he
related to
does,
anything,
and
but
he
yeah.
wants wings. He wants wings.
Yes, yes.
Um, he wants to go to his local KFC and buy the big
Absolutely.
bucket. He wants the wings.
All right, all right. Let's move on to the final big character, which people would probably say isn't a big character, but Anne, who is the girl who steals the ring in the Snow Village people thing.
Did you
And
say you had something about Willibald though?
yeah, but I put him in like the minor character section. Anne is
Oh,
probably a minor
I
character.
can't believe. I
I
can't
mean,
believe
yeah, I think I'm sure he'll become a bigger character. Otherwise, he wouldn't be kept around for this song. But yeah, at this point, I don't know.
For context, Willibald's arguably my favorite character that deserves the least amount of favor from me, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
like everybody's got that one minor character that they really like,
Yeah, yeah.
and it doesn't. It's like I don't want to say objective, but in the typical sense, it's like,
No, yeah.
okay, I'm not sure why you like them, but okay, dude, you go do you. And
Yep, I understand. I get it fully.
yeah, so I'm a Willibald stan. It makes me a special snowflake in this Vinland Saga community. So
Hmm,
I will live for him until I die. I
perfect.
don't like normal characters. I'm not a Thorfinn or Askeladd fan or Thorkell fan.
They're too
I'm cool.
mainstream.
Too mainstream for me.
Very good. Well,
Unironically, probably a bit more true than I'd like it to be, but
you know what? Maybe he'll become a main character. I don't know. That's my prediction. He's gonna be
the
uh
mainest character.
he'll be the main villain. You know, last video you were talking about there's no villains. He's gonna be the villain.
Yeah.
And that's why you like him.
He's gonna turn up and he's gonna be like, I was reading from the ultra satanic scripts and here's evil Satan magic.
Yes.
Ooh.
Love is the destruction of the world or something. I don't know.
Yeah. The greatest love a man can do is death, and that's why you must die.
Yes.
Mwahaha.
Perfect.
There you
All right. Well, back to Anne, the final main character who isn't a main character. So
She's
for
a main
her,
character in this book. She's
well,
a main
okay.
character in this book. Yeah.
She's a main character in that she's
the protagonist for a chapter. And
yeah, for a
there's the
long
biggest
chapter as well.
Yeah.
So I want to preface anything I say about her, which is that I think I'm completely wrong. Like when I'm reading the chapter, it feels like there's a lot of ways to interpret what's going on. And I've just got one very particular interpretation that I could change. Like next video, I could come back and I'll be like, oh, I read it again. And I'm like, I was dead wrong about everything. So I want to preface this more than all my other interpretations because I feel like this is a very like bold one. But I don't know. We'll see, I guess, what you think about it. So, in regards to Anne, what I have written is that her moral compass is guided by a fear of punishment. So she's afraid of God. She doesn't really care about getting into heaven. She's more afraid of being eternally tortured in hell. But in order to avoid hell, she has to be a slave to the rigid doctrines of Christianity. So she steals a ring as an act representing her desire for freedom. She does this because she knows it's an act of defiance against her enslavement. On being reminded of why she should be afraid of what she's done, by her dad, she tries to throw away the ring out of fear, but in the end she can't do it because she hates feeling like a sinner. And it's a feedback loop where she fears punishment, so she wants to break free of the belief that's creating this fear of punishment, but in turn, her trying to break free is what makes her feel like she's going to be punished. Which I think is just really interesting. And another point about that is that this is a very minor point, that the irony is that if she'd never been raised to be afraid of eternal torture for small mistakes, then she never would have made the mistake of stealing the ring in the first place, in my opinion. So it's a very cool, like, little character thing that I love a lot in this chapter. But what do you think about all of that? About my pre-rehearsed script here that I've written.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so I guess I was following you. I'd say I don't exactly quite understand exactly.
Yep.
But I was following you to, like, yeah, she feels like she's breaking these rigid rules. But she breaks these rigid rules, which makes her feel like a sinner. But then she tries to get rid of the ring, which is her symbol of freedom. Hang on. And then what after that? What's the next step?
Well, her getting rid of the ring, in my opinion, is a symbol of falling back into that fear. Like, she's afraid she's going to be punished, so she's just trying to get rid of the ring so that she can go back to before she stole it. And I think the opposite, which is that when she actually can't throw away the ring, that's evidence of the freedom. Like, she's seeking that freedom, which the ring represents to her. Like, I stole this ring, I broke free from that, the doctrines that I have to follow. So I can't get rid of this ring because it's the only little thing of freedom I have.
I see. Oh, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, maybe that's the Attack on Titan brain. Thinking about freedom too much. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I think, I mean, I would have not interpreted it in that way.
Yep.
I'm not
so
saying
that's why I made
wrong.
my big preface at the beginning. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. What I like about this scene is that, and I generally think this is nice about Vinland Saga in general, is that it's a very human approach to religion, and almost a very psychological approach, but also very genuine. I've met people like this who are stuck in the don'ts of Christianity. Don't do that. Don't do this. Generally known as legalism, of this kind of really ultra rule binding part, which I guess for Christianity and its mainstream doctrine is a bit ironic, because the whole point is that you can mess up. Forgiveness is like the whole point of Jesus, which, you know, I guess is talked about a little bit by Thorkell and his crew, about how Jesus seems so weak where he's limply hanging on that cross. And yeah, it's like almost like forgiveness is weak in this world. And so that's why she doesn't really... Yeah, I think you're very much correct that she's not so much wanting to get to heaven. She's more of wanting to avoid hell. And that leads her to the spiral of... She is just transfixed by this ring. And maybe the idea of that, it represents her freedom to her, or her own choice. Maybe that's what it kind of represents. But I think in some way, maybe it's a bit more simple than that, where it's just she really, really likes this ring. But she just had this moment of weakness where she just had to nick it, basically. And the saddest part about it is that she thinks that, oh, I've got this ring, I'll give it back. I'll give it back because I don't want God to punish me. Otherwise, I'll be punished by God. And then she's like, well, maybe God doesn't want to punish me. And then the Vikings come, almost like the reckoning for her sin, and destroy her life and her livelihood because of her nicking this ring. But ironically, she wouldn't be outside throwing away the ring, because if she didn't have it, you know, she would be killed with the rest of the family. So the ring saves her, but then also dooms her to a life that she would not have, you know. I'm not explaining it very well, but like, it's this weird tragedy and almost irony and where she like, I think she almost ponders it at the end, what like God takes her family away from her to heaven, and she's been left in hell, in this purgatory on this earth by
Interesting.
herself because she's taken that ring. It's almost like a punishment. You know, like there's so many ways to take it. Like, her family's been, has her family been punished for her transgression? Has she been actually punished for this transgression because her family has been taken to heaven without her? They've been raptured. You know, if you want to use terminology
Mm-hmm.
of the Christian second coming, without her, you know, or has she been saved by the ring, and in like a secular worldview where there is no God, she continues and is able to live her own life and not be killed by the Vikings, because of the ring.
Mm.
So there's like, oh man, like I kind of come up with this on the spot, but there's so many like different ways about this chapter that you can kind of view, like, depending on your theological view of the world, you know, do you think like there is a God? Do you think there is not? Or how, you know? And that's what makes
Yeah.
it such a, I love this chapter so much, honestly.
Yeah, I
It's such a
agree.
good one.
Yeah. I think just
Um,
the openness to interpretation I like a lot. Um, but yeah, I think something you said there, when I listen back to this, I think it'll trigger something, but like I think I am wrong. Now that I think there is something that you said where I'm like, I think that's more accurate. But I'll think about that later. But
Hold on to your
um
interpretation, because I think, you know, the more interpretations, the better. And if eventually it
sure.
does
Yeah.
fall to the wayside, that's fine. But I think it's one that I haven't heard before, and so I'm glad that you've said it, and so viewers will hopefully enjoy it.
Yeah. So that was Anne. I have one other thing which we don't really have to. I'll just mention it. I wrote that she wants to be free like the Vikings, but the irony is that the Vikings killed her family. Now I don't have much to say on that. I don't strongly believe that, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But
Mm,
that's Anne. We'll be done with Anne. I'm sure I'll bring her up in other videos when I think about it more. But I think she's really interesting. And also she's, as far as I know, she's not dead, so she could come back in the story. But there's no need for her to come back. Like her whole story is wrapped up. If she does, it'd be
yeah.
great. I'd like it.
To
Um,
well, just to make my point now, I will have a little spoiler. She doesn't
okay.
come back,
All
and this
right.
is
Yeah.
one thing that Yukimura is not afraid to do. He will introduce a character that is complex and fleshed out. But
Yep.
because they're you know, we're not in that part of the world anymore, it's realistic that we wouldn't see them again, and they've spent their time well, and it can kind of almost, I think, to me, gives this world a feeling of roundness. I think
Mm.
I've heard this is what people praise Hunter x Hunter for, and ironically, it didn't work for me in Hunter x Hunter. But one thing that Hunter x Hunter does is that at the beginning of arcs, it's just happy to drop and pick up characters, introduce new
Yep.
ones, and be like, "Hey, this is the world we live in. There's not just going to be the same reoccurring 30 characters, you know, that we'll see again and again. If you come
Mm-hmm.
across them on your journey again, it would make sense because you're all hunters and you're trying to go for the same goal, but that's just kind of how it happens. And so Vinland
Yep.
Saga is kind of similar, where it's like, yeah, some characters you won't see again. And, you know, if you're a fan of that character, I'm sorry, but that's kind of just how it is, you know.
Yeah. I like it. Um. Good. Bold decisions. You know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need fan feedback, or like if an author likes the character, they'll bring him back, finish him off.
Yeah,
Um.
for sure.
But that's that. So that's all my major characters. I'm just trying to see what else do we have. There's not too much left. Okay, so with the minor characters, there's three. And I don't have much to say about any of them. So King Sven, um, in chapter 19, I thought it was interesting, which is sorry, when he decides to leave Canute behind at London. I thought it was interesting that Sven actually listens to Ragnar when Ragnar speaks out about Sven's decision. Like he doesn't get angry at Ragnar or like feel insulted that he spoke up to him or anything, even though Floki does on like his behalf. Um, which is a very interesting, like it makes him feel like a good leader. Like he's someone who listens to people who are around him. Which I mean, obviously King Sven becomes a much bigger character later, and I know a little bit, like I remember bits of it. But that was a cool little detail. We haven't seen his face yet as well. But it's a cool little
Mm.
detail about him at this point.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Sven gets a hate because people don't like him because he's ugly, and he doesn't have many superficial redeeming character qualities. He's old,
Mhm.
he's haggard. You know, he has this face off with Askeladd, and Askeladd's everybody's favorite.
Yep.
Um, he's not the nicest dad to Canute all the time. Like,
No,
you know,
no.
I'm not sure. I think it's actually in the next one they go into a bit of their, you know. But as you say, like, he isn't a bad leader. He's actually, I think, also historically a good leader. You know, he's being successful in his conquests. Um, and I guess it's interesting that you pick up on that early because I don't remember that little tidbit, but it's interesting because
Mm.
yeah, like with all things in Vinland Saga, most characters have redeeming qualities to them, um, and are more like your main characters than you may want to think. So yeah.
Yep. King Sven, good. So you're saying
Mm.
he's a morally upstanding guy, is that right?
No, I'm not endorsing Svein's actions. He's
All right.
not. He's a particularly poor father, I'd say. At
Yes,
least in the
yes.
context of Vinland Saga.
All right, let's move on to Willibald. Willibald. Um, so I have very few notes on him as well. My first one is that he looks like Thorfinn with his ragged hair. Um, Now I
Interesting.
don't find anything about them in any way paralleled that I can think of at this moment. But they were paralleled in their look apparently.
Yeah.
And the only other note I have about him is that actually this is kind of somewhat interesting actually. He freaks out when Askeladd's men talk about what Thor's did to them. How he I don't know what specifically it was that he freaked out about, but he freaked out about that whole like talking about Thor's. And my guess is that he thinks that Thor's was Jesus. If he is a Christian, because Thor's does kind of sound like Jesus in a way, like this man who was able to remove all the conflict by just talking, or like by not killing anyone, and yeah, that's my only thing about him. Is like, did he think Thor's was Jesus? Which is pretty funny, but maybe that's what happened.
Okay, so I'd say you're kind of right, but also not right. I don't think he thinks
Okay,
he's actually like in the embodiment of Jesus, but Thor's is
right. Okay.
definitely like I'd say like a messianic figure in a way. Um,
Mm,
and the key thing here is that they're discussing what love is, right, in this chapter, and the brothers are
yeah.
like, "Oh, we have brotherly love," and then Willibald is trying to figure out what love. He's like, "No, no, no, that's not quite it." And then they mention Thor's, and so
Yep.
I think Thor's is almost this hook that like he's like that sounds like true love. That sounds like true love, and
Mm,
then that would be expanded upon further because
yes.
that's kind of like Willibald's deal. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
Absolutely. That's the one
You
thing I
know.
remember about him from the anime. Just he's talking about
So
love.
so I think this is one of those things where in this book, Thor's as a character has echoes. He's brought up with Thor's. That's what
Yep.
saves Thorfinn. Oh, you're Thorfinn, the son of Thor's. Um, and honestly, this history kind of in the end, in some ways, saves Askeladd's band. You know, the fact that Thorkell just will go out of his way to want to duel Thorfinn because he just has that much respect for his father. Um,
Hmm.
Thor's is still in some ways having an impact on Askeladd, and I think that colors his relationship with Thorfinn. Though we can come back to that.
Hmm.
Um, Willibald once again, Thor's come back up as this almost this kind of like idealized like paragon of virtue in a way, um, and that links to like, and this is one of the great things I kind of love about Thor's as a character is that yeah, sure he dies early on. We don't see much individual of his character, but the Troll of Yorm and his echoes throughout the Viking world and his legacy remains strong. And so you still feel like even outside of Thorfinn as a character, who Thor's has a massive impact on, Thor's still is around in a way, despite being dead. So
Yep.
yeah.
So I guess before I transition, but the final character is I've written about Bjorn, and I said there's still he hasn't done much. Like I haven't really thought about him. But more about your Thor's point. We can talk about chapter 20 now, which is the Ragnarok chapter, which is
Mm.
the one that has the opens with the dream of Vinland and ends with Askeladd's speech about trying to rescue Canute. So, the chapter is very clearly paralleling Thor's and Askeladd. Because it opens with Thor's and Thorfinn looking over a hill in like Thorfinn's Vinland dream. As the Vikings are coming to pillage that town, they're looking down at. And then the chapter closes with, or I guess towards the end of the chapter, you've got Askeladd and Thorfinn looking over a hill again, this time in England, at the Vikings who've already pillaged the town. So it's a very clear like parallel. The chapter is, I guess, firstly just talking about Thor's and Askeladd. Obviously, there's a parallel there just because Thorfinn's in both of them doing similar actions. Now I don't know what this means really. I mean, there's like a million interpretations. No, honestly, I don't know. Just the fact that they're paralleled is interesting.
I kind of forgot that it's actually just a dream. Thorfinn. And I think the key thing is that, and you'll see this with Thorfinn's characters as we continue on, post-anime as well. Actually, no, I won't say that. I keep wanting to say stuff, but I swear I'm having to cock-block you.
Yes, it's okay.
That's my bad. But yeah, like the fact that this is Thorfinn's dream is interesting in a way, and how his dream changes over this course of the story. But yeah, like I think it kind of does represent some like Thorfinn, like Thorfinn knows that like he shouldn't be having this revenge. Like he deep down knows that this revenge nonsense. He knows it wouldn't make Thor's happy, but he's kind of stuck in it. He's got this kind of like sunken cost fallacy in a way.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I've gone so far already. Let me just keep on going. It won't be much longer. I spent literally like 10 years of my life trying to kill this dude, and all this stuff. So,
yep.
And then you kind of talk about the parallels between Thor's and him on the hill. It may just be a superficial parallel because I haven't actually really noticed that before. But they do have like almost two different conversations. Maybe you could draw something between them for sure. So
yeah, which I'm honestly not sure what it is at this point, but something I noticed. The more important parallel I think is that I think the chapter is paralleling Thorfinn's idea of Vinland with the idea of Ragnarok and the final judgment. Because obviously this chapter is titled Ragnarok, and it opens with a like the dream of Vinland. Now, I don't know what exactly is trying to be said here, but what I've written in my notes is that maybe the story is trying to say that even the most ideal of places will eventually be destroyed for something newer, just like what Askeladd was saying about how the Romans were wiped out and replaced. So it's kind of critiquing the idea of Vinland in a way, where it's like Vinland will be destroyed. Like even this idea of Vinland will eventually be destroyed, and there'll be something greater eventually. So, like, in other words, there will always be a Vinland that is something different from the present, essentially. And it will always change over time as well. Just like how the Saxons replaced the Romans. So, yeah. But also, that's also my final note about this chapter. So there's a lot we can say about this chapter. But if you have anything else to talk about, you bring it up as well if you want.
This is one of those things that, like, this chapter has only become more thematically relevant as we've gotten later on in the story. It feels weirdly... it works well in the prologue as a unique thing, but then over the next two arcs, it almost gets forgotten. And then in this final arc, it kind of rears its head again in a very interesting manner. So I don't want to talk too much on it.
Okay.
But one thing I do want to note a little bit that I'm not sure if you've kind of picked up on is you talk about the parallel between Thor's and Askeladd. You talk about the parallel between Vinland and this place, which I think are good picks up. But you haven't talked about a possible parallel between Thorfinn and Askeladd.
No, I haven't even thought about that. Okay.
And this may elaborate on your I hate the Norsemen. And Thorfinn earlier also talking about I hate this war and violence. You kind of get this earlier part in the chapter where these men get just like into a fight for literally no reason because they're being dumb and they've got this honor and they've offended each other. And it's just kind of what happens. And then, and Askeladd's distanced himself from there. Bjorn's still stuck down there, but but Bjorn is discontent with it as well, which maybe it kind of makes him a bit of an outlier among the Norsemen because he's saying, "Oh, here they go again." Thorfinn looks at this rape in disgust, and instead of they say, "Oh, yeah." So actually, what they say after they say, "Oh, what? He's always looking down on us. Forget him. He's still just a boy." So Thorfinn. They almost feel like Thorfinn's condescending towards them, like he despises them in a
Yeah.
way. And so Thorfinn goes to a hill to get away from the Vikings because he doesn't, maybe really feel like he's one of them. He doesn't. He remarks on how he's not part of Askeladd's band later on. He's not like other people.
Yeah.
And guess who he finds out here all by himself? It's Askeladd himself.
Yeah, that's a great point. Man.
And so Askeladd is also disinterested in it, and he says, "Oh, I hate the Norsemen." And so it's one of those weird things where, like, despite them, and I think I'm ripping this from a Kyle video, which I hate to admit, but this is one of the reasons why I still I stuck around on his thing because he makes I think at least a point similar to this when he's slamming the anime basically. So I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, well, this guy is still saying something interesting, but it's like almost the ironic thing is that these two here are the people who can get along the most and understand each other the most, despite Thorfinn being committed to wanting to kill Askeladd. So something along those lines.
This is really interesting. Yeah, this is definitely going to change how I think about things because that is a very good, very interesting parallel that I just never crossed my mind for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the hard things, I guess, being in my position. I'm not sure, like, I know this is self-contained and, but I think because you've watched the anime,
yeah.
I'm more willing to kind of go out there and, like, kind of at least push what I view and my interpretations and on what I've read.
No, I love it. It's great.
For what Askeladd and Thorfinn has done. I know it makes it more interesting for you, but it may also make your thoughts less interesting later.
That's true.
But yeah, I think while Thorfinn doesn't realize this, Askeladd understands that they're both kind of different to everybody else.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, we can get into there's so much like tiny little details that are quite subtle, but with their relationship, and I really quite like that. So, but yeah, Askeladd, yeah. So like, there's this point where Askeladd's kind of like the world of man is slowly but surely growing old. The Saxons wiped out the Romans, and we're here to put the end to the Saxons. The glory of the Roman Empire is a relic of the distant past. If you believe what the Christians say, the final judgment is coming in just 20 years. Now, within Christian theology, I'm not quite sure what that is coming, but maybe it's because it's 1,000 years after Jesus Christ died. So the timeline at the moment is 1013 BC. Traditionally, Jesus is thought to have died in 33 AD. And then he came back after 3 days. He died when he was 33 years old or whatever, something like that. That's the general, I guess, the official thought. So yes, maybe like they think, oh, it's 1,000 years after Jesus.
Yeah,
and,
they do mention that at one point.
Yeah. Oh, I see. And I mean, like, if you know that Revelation, it does talk about the end times being increasingly more apocalyptic, and the Vikings are maybe just seen as these savages that are pillaging and a part of the apocalypse of Revelation and stuff like that. Anyway, so then there's this panel. So he's gazing out, and then he's got this panel where then it kind of flashes back to the two men actually killing each other in the camp. So one of the guys actually kills another dude, and it's just this kind of pointless waste of life, but it's just all for the fun of it. And he says, so if you believe what the Christians say, the final judgment is coming in just 20 years. When that day comes, God will kill all the humans, and the world as we know it will cease. The final battle of Ragnarok. Look at it, Thorfinn. Isn't it absurd? The sun rises on the twilight of man. It's one of those weird poetic stuff where Askeladd's just monologuing to a lot of people, to Thorfinn, but like, you kind of want to put it together, but yeah, it's kind of like almost like Yukimura isn't subtle with how he portrays the Vikings. I think he's pretty condemning of them in some ways, or at least maybe this isn't Yukimura speaking. Maybe this is Askeladd speaking. But Askeladd sees the Vikings as, yeah, this is probably a better way of putting it. Askeladd sees the Vikings as like everything wrong with the world. They're like sinful. They're like the epitome of sodomy and just this awful, awful, awful thing. As these two guys are just murdering each other. Kind of like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this kind of links into Canute's arc later on and all this stuff. But I feel like, man, now I want to sit down and think about it more.
Yeah, good story.
I don't know. Sorry, I just went on a big tangent there. But yeah, there's a lot to do with it. And then
No, absolutely.
And then Askeladd ends it with this most peculiar line, as you point out earlier. He says, "Don't you hear it, Bjorn? The sounds of Ragnarok's footsteps are drawing near," which is crazy, compelling, and yeah, just interesting.
Yep, good, very good chapter. And there's also, throughout all these chapters, there's a lot of mentions of like the judgment and Ragnarok, and a bunch of other ways of saying it. I'm interested to see if it, like, eventually we get a 20-year time skip or something and we see what happens, like people freaking out. Obviously nothing's really going to happen. Like God isn't going to come down and, I don't know, set fire to the ocean or something, but I don't know, it would be interesting to see what people are thinking at that time, you know? Anyway.
Yeah. No comment on that. Maybe God does come down and set fire to everything.
Hey, maybe. I mean, I don't remember it, but you never know. It could happen.
I mean, you haven't seen 20 years later, have you?
Actually, no. Well, I mean, in his like history, right? Unless this isn't a historical story, which honestly, I don't know. Maybe it's not. But there are. You said that Thorfinn was a real-ish person or something.
But I also will say it's historical fiction. So
yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. I guess we'll see. Maybe God will come down and
yeah, maybe Thorfinn, maybe Thorkell will have to fight Jesus. Have you seen like another tangent? There's like this fighting game of like different like I guess legendary figures, shall we say? And Jesus is fighting with his cross on his back, but he's broken off the two arm pieces and he's punching people. It's a hilarious game. Anyway, I'll send a link. It's very funny. So that's what Thorkell's doing with Jesus at the moment.
Excellent.
In the manga. That's what's happening. Sorry for the spoilers, everybody. My bad.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But in getting back on track here, the last section I've got here in my notes is about love, which is something that is introduced at this point in the story. But I do remember in the anime that there is an important scene about it with Canute, specifically. But my note is that I never understood what it was when I was watching the anime. This was something that when Canute had his like revelation or whatever, when Bjorn was like protecting him, I was like, I don't know what's going on here. So me trying to piece it together now with like half anime knowledge and me reading through the manga now in like detail, my guess is that love is the connections you have with other people. So one line is that I think Willibald says that without love, gold, silver, horses, and women are all worthless. And I feel like that implies that human connection is everything. Which is something I agree with, like as a philosophy. But I'm interested. Yeah, I'm interested to see how if this is in line with what happens later with Canute and his speech there.
I will not say anything because first of all, it's not uncommon for people to be confused by love. I think it's weirdly like it's one of those things that like I think there's a lot of parts of the prologue that feel profound, but you don't quite understand what it's like, what it's getting at quite yet. But the Willibald speech and the Canute speech on love, which will be in the next book, I'm pretty sure, is probably the most in your face about it, and people just get confused about it. So it's one of the most common questions on the subreddit, and I imagine it will take the bulk of what we talk about next time. And
Yeah. Okay.
I think this discussion is really interesting because we don't really talk about plot points at all. You know,
No, I guess.
I kind of just realized this. But I mean,
Maybe it's because I know what happens already. Like when I get beyond the anime, it could be like now I'll start talking about plot points.
yeah, maybe be like, oh, this moment was really cool. Like,
Yeah.
but at the moment we're being pretty big brain, I guess, which is a
Yeah,
bad thing.
But to finish off this point about love, this is the last thing I have in all of my grand notes here. I feel like the idea of love is it feeds into to Thor's philosophy of having no enemies. Because if my interpretation of it is correct, which is that love is about like human connection, then I feel like what Thor's belief would be is that no person's life is more valuable than any other's. Like the connections that individuals have are more important than, like it's important to love all other humans, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like human connection is the utmost important thing, and I feel like that is kind of in line with like what I think about Thor's. Now I'm sure I'll talk more about this next time, but that's at least that's what I'm thinking about love. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. I will refrain from commenting.
Yes.
Your comment did spark a little bit of an idea in my head as I kind of put something together by myself, but like just talking about it again it's one of those things. Is like once you hear someone talking about it, you start thinking about it yourself. Any situation, and you end up having a better understanding of it, even if you thought you understood it to begin with. So yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about it next time. That book is definitely less chunky, I think. Oh no, actually, that may be one of the bigger books. But
well, this one was 12 chapters. I mean, yeah, a lot of pages, I guess.
I mean,
12 chapters.
The chapters in this is when Vinland Saga chapters were normal sized.
Right.
And if you're putting, well, not even normal sized, but like, later on chapters get a bit more slim. I mean, they stay pretty big for a decent while, but yeah, the chapters in this are beefy. I forgot about that. So. And with less pages per chapter, it just means the art gets better, basically.
Perfect. Love it.
For sure.
But that's everything except for one question that I have for you, which I don't know if this is like a spoiler you will like that is answered or if it's never covered at all. But Thorkell references at one point that someone references that Thorkell and Sigvaldi, who is like the leader of the Jomsvikings, I think he calls Thorkell somehow they're related. Like he says, "Oh, your brother Sigvaldi" or something. Now is that an actual, like, are they actually related, or is that like just like a thing of, oh, we're all brothers, you know? Because if he is related, I feel like that has a big implication, because like that would make him Thorfinn's great uncle and then Thor's uncle, which is, it's a weird thing to think about. So I don't know if is that something you can answer, or is that like something they'll talk about later, or like
it does come up a little bit, but I don't think it's too spoilerish. Yes, Thorkell is Thorfinn's great uncle.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that's interesting to think about.
So Sigvaldi is Helga's father.
Yeah.
So he's so Thorkell's the uncle of Helga, and so
it's wild to think about.
And Thorkell were brother in arms before Thor's got married, of course, presumably. But then Thor's also married Sigvaldi's son, and Sigvaldi is the leader of the Jomsviking.
Cool. Yep.
Or sorry, the chieftain. Sorry, but yeah.
Yep. All right.
Yeah. So it kind of, I guess, in some aspects, it does explain. I mean, it does explain where Thorfinn gets some of his super strength from his mother's side, at least, if he's got Thorkell in those genes, basically. So.
All right.
Even though I don't think Helga ever shows, like, it's not like Ilva who shows off some big strength, you know. We didn't talk about the Ilva chapter, but yeah. Short one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Nice short chapter. That's everything. We did it.
Wow, that was a long chat. I have a feeling you're gonna have to edit this one down a little bit. There's a few tangents in it, but
we'll see.
We'll see. It may end up being really long. So video. Apologies to any. I mean, if people enjoy this length, please say. But if you want us to go faster, we can definitely try and make that possible.
For
sure.
Yeah. So that's yeah. I don't have anything else to add. I don't know. Like, subscribe. You know, as they say.
Yeah, do that stuff. I guess it's a bit hard because I'm trying to react to what you're saying, and because I'm reacting, I'm then going on rambles. Well,
No, I love it.
You do,
I love
but you
hearing
guys
it.
have, but you guys have, you have a scripted thing which is good, but I feel like it's almost dependent on me. So if you guys find it a bit long, I can definitely try and shorten myself a little bit. But you know what? I thought this one we would have less to talk about than we did, but I reckon if I read it, I'd be like, wow, we've got 2 big chapters at least in here to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful stuff.
Yep. All right. See you guys next time, I guess.
I'm sure we'll do this next week. I won't have a deadline. Actually, my deadline's next Thursday. So, yeah. I mean, I guess one question I would like to ask you: how like are you feeling? You're at the point where you're like, man, I wish I didn't have to wait to talk to Jarkey about this. I just want to keep on reading. Are you at that point yet? Or
well, I mean, like, luckily I finished this yesterday, and then we got to talk about it today. So I don't know.
Okay. But,
so honestly, the time was great. I feel like I do want it. Like, I'm gonna read more tonight, definitely. Like, I'm in, definitely. Cool. I'm excited to get past what I already know as well.
Yeah. 50, to be fair, it's easy to take things slow when you know the plot points that are roughly going to happen. But it'll be interesting to see later if you're like, dude, I literally can't wait. Because I know, like, when I get really into something, I'm just like, dude, no, like, I just want to keep on reading. Why do I have to stop? I have no self-control. But maybe as my elder, you have more discipline.
Yep, I'm just perfect. I'm like Thor's.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know who I'm like. I'd probably be guessed like Thorkell. I don't understand your greatness, but I understand that you're great.
Absolutely. All right. Wait, have we ended the video yet?
I don't know.
All right. If we haven't, see you later.
See you. Bye.